All right. Hello, hello. Whew. Just realized that. That's directly in the view. Okay. Well, it is what it is. Make chat a little bit bigger so I can actually read it. All right. We've got not the Bevy examples. Last week was the Bevy Jam. So I can pull that up. So last week was the Bevy Jam. It got about 99 entries, which is great. Voting ends in about a week, so I figured I was going back and forth on whether we would play these games on stream or not. I think I'm going to do them off stream, just so that I don't like affect other people's voting and rating and stuff. So that brings us to, let's see, cargo run. I guess release is the last thing I did. I also damn. I also participated, but I took probably Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and didn't really do anything. So I didn't finish anything else. But I think I'm going to continue with the game on my Saturday streams. So the theme was chain reaction, and the idea here was basically chain good landings together. It looks different on web versus native, which is really interesting. I think it's a shadows configuration thing. But in general, also like web is just more restricted than native. So there are features that I would want to use, like decals, that are currently like not working on web. So there's a lot to do for the game. The thing that I probably care the most about is the controls and the movement. Right now, the situation is basically like if you fast fall, you add velocity. If you hit something like I just did, or like I hit it again, there's like a very light hit stop, and it takes your velocity down, and eventually you lose. Which is fine, but it's like the bare bones of a game. So I figured I would take what I have today and do just kind of some cleanup. I was doing like work on this in the airport as I flew back and forth from New York. So some things got put in places that they probably don't belong, and so on and so forth. So I figure we'll start with cleaning up some of that work. This playing file is kind of where I ended up just like dumping everything. We're using avian collision observers to do collision with obstacles. Obviously, there's like a lot of obstacles that you can make for this kind of thing. We have a collide and slide algorithm for the movement, which I think is in here. Camera follow, debug camera, gravity, casting. Yeah. So I named it casting. And this is literally just collide and slide. This isn't perfect. I think that it doesn't hit all that often, or like it doesn't break all that often. But when it does, you just fall through the map. And the times that when it does that are kind of like if you've just hit something. I don't know, it's hard to make happen on purpose, so I think we'll end up writing a test or something for that. Oh, I think that was it actually, right before I killed the app. So the controller here is a kinematic controller. I think that's right for, well, it's either going to be kinematic or non-physical in the long term. I think that because I want to deal with all these colliders, I want to use Avian. I would like to use kinematic. I would like to get better at writing kinematic character controllers. I think this is a good simplified case for that. But there is a lot going on here that like should be fixed. Like this shadow, you're kind of always in shadow on the native version. On the web version, there's actually like, I don't want to call it a bug, but the shadows don't quite have as much capacity to be shown. So it looks a little bit different, and I kind of used that effect. But we have, let's see, directional light. So we've got directional light, raw light, sunlight, but we don't have any like transform on this or whatnot. We also don't have like atmosphere. We don't have a skybox or anything like that. All things that I think would help out quite a bit here. We also just kind of spawn everything in this one start playing system. So I think that the raw sunlight is for if you're using atmosphere or the atmospherics. I would like to move this all into crates and stuff, but we'll see. There's also a lot of crates in here that like I just included, but we're not really using. Noise was a really good crate. That's how we're doing all of the landscape variation. That's a fairly new one. That got released like a month or two ago. Seedling is another one, but we aren't doing any audio. I didn't do a number of things like skyboxes and whatever because I didn't want to mess around with them on web while I was in an airport. There's also a lot of config in the TOML, and this all came from like the Bevy new 2D project, but it's quite complicated in general. So I don't know how I feel about that in general. We'll see. a lot of these things got disabled for web, so we should re-enable things like Bevy Inspector eGUI. See, what else do we have? Let's not do release. I don't know why I'm doing release. The other thing is that these obstacles don't get despawned. They just infinitely stick around. So we should definitely find a way to despawn them. One thing that people tried to do during the jam was like turn around. They were like trying to go the other way, which you can't do. Like there's no, even if I think you take your speed way down, right? Like you would have to hit all three of these and then like try to turn. And it's just like, this is not something that you're supposed to be trying to do. And yet people were like, yeah, I should go backwards. So we're gonna have to add some extra, I guess, like signage or whatever to get people to not try to do that. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. It's like, I don't think we're choosing a new seed for the landscape every time we start, but the obstacles are not seeded yet either, so they should probably be. Sorry, I'm still dealing with the smoking neighbors, so I've got this cough that just won't go away. Yada yada. I removed all the buttons. Let's see. Options should be in here somewhere. Spawn width needs to come in. Spawn width is already in. We need fonts there. Just clones of the font handle that we can use in different places. What's wrong here? Oh. I think I'm using this in multiple places. Two, three, four. So I did just kind of like throw the high speed in here, but I should probably go somewhere else on this page. The other thing is that the terrain here is infinite. It's chunked. It is using effectively the same technique that I made a series of videos a while back about doing terrain generation in chunks. It's using basically that technique. doing noise, modifying the vertices, recomputing the normals. Except for the fact that it's just one one long strip of chunks instead of being like a 3x3 set of chunks or something like that. I did think briefly about like maybe generating more of this stuff on the GPU. I don't know that we want to just yet. One reason being that we're using like a very simple collider for the landscape right now, which is tri-mesh from mesh, which is like not, as I understand it, the best choice. Is it on GitHub? It is. It's probably not anywhere that you'll look for it though. So it's under my personal account, Bevy Jam 6 at the moment. And you can see all of the terrain chunking and stuff, anything that you want to look at. The terrain chunking is actually pretty simple. It's very much like make some noise. Noise has been a really great crate. Let's see, noise, rust. There we go. It's a little bit, how do I say this? It's a little bit harder to use than other crates just because it's very much like primitives that you can build up into noise rather than like a bunch of helper functions, if that makes sense. So if you're using like P5, I think JS, right? They just have like a noise function, and this is Perlin noise. And you dump arguments into this noise function and you get back Perlin noise. Which is like fine. And you can see this like grid here that they have for the demo. But the noise crate is actually really nice because it allows you to build up different kinds of noises if you understand how noise is built in general. But if you don't understand like how different noises are built, it can be a little bit tough to understand what's going on here. Hey, Roberto, how's it going? Let's see, they have a new book, but I don't think it's linked here. Repository. This book is dope. So it's very much like there is no there is no like predefined Perlin noise function, but if you look for Perlin noise in the book, it'll talk you through like how to build Perlin noise using this API, which is really great, honestly. It's got a bunch of like common kinds of noise and how to build them using this API. I guess it could, I don't remember if it has, I think it does now, actually, now that I think about it. Misc noise, prelude, where's the common? Layering, math noise. Anyway, the point being that learning how to work with it takes a second, but there we go, Perlin. So if you wanted to do Perlin, or Perlin with a derivative of the Perlin noise, or simplex or whatever, those are like provided as type aliases for you. And they are just the type aliases that are in the book. Noise has been great. The noise crate. I would love to have something similar on the GPU, but we don't. Let's see, terrain stuff. Pick an arbitrary chunk size, pick an arbitrary amplitude. So long term, this landscape generation is going to have to become, I don't want to say more complicated, but I've been putting a lot of thought into what the downsides or like what the challenges of this kind of game are. One of the challenges is when you start out slow, it's hard to gain momentum. But once you have speed, it's a lot easier to gain a lot more momentum. So if I go with the approach of you really only gain speed on good landings or something like that, or by hitting like speed rings or whatever, then when you are moving slowly, you kind of don't really get much of an opportunity to speed up, which seems like an inverted, I don't want to say like incentive is the wrong word, but it's inverted from what it should be. Like the curve is, when you start out, it's hard to gain speed. And then as you're going really, really fast, it's easy to gain speed. And we need to kind of like try to invert that a little bit so that when you're moving very slow, it's a little bit easier to gain speed. And then as you're moving faster and faster, it gets harder to gain speed. So we end up kind of capping it, but not really. So like we were going 108 at some point in that last session. I think making it easy to go from say like 60 to 100 and making it hard to go from 180 to 200, like that kind of thing. So we've got our Perlin noise, loaded chunks. I've got some resources here. I didn't comment anything because this was game jam code, so I got to go back and like write comments and stuff. The debug material is this UV debug texture. That's the thing that we see on the landscape right now. This is from like one of the Bevy demos, actually. So this is not going to be the like long-term landscape. This is going to be like swapped to be grass or swapped to be desert or swapped to be, I don't know, whatever level, space. But right now we're just kind of creating a standard material, generating that image and using that image as the base color texture. We've got land chunk and land chunk noise. Land chunk noise is just the noise. We've got loaded chunks and a system to make sure that we have the chunks that we expect to have. So if we run this, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on stream actually, because the Bevy inspector eGUI stuff is kind of, so like we don't have any land chunks. If we hit start, we end up with 5 land chunks. As this moves forward, another land chunk gets created. Actually, did I not get rid of the old ones? I might not have. Yeah, so we aren't cleaning up after ourselves for land chunks or obstacles, which is fine. But it does mean that we are like inserting more meshes and it's just kind of like growing. But this is the system that is making sure that we have enough chunks in front of us to keep going. we're basically just taking the chunk size and converting it down into like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 based on the chunk size. Iterate over those chunk sizes, plus 5 in this case. I think that's actually wrong for long term, but we'll see. This is also where we're doing our sampling for the obstacles. So we use Bevy's uniform mesh sampler in this case. And this is not seeded, as you can see, which is why the obstacles change every run, even though I think the noise is seeded. So we got to fix that too. Then we've just got this land chunk, mesh 3D, material 3D, tri-mesh for mesh, collision margin. I kind of hacked the, how do I say this? The collide and slide algorithm that we're using versus a thin, like triangle sized collider has a tendency to like push itself through that triangle. So using collision margin around the collider makes it a little bit thicker and makes that happen a little bit less. I think I put it at a place for the jam entry that actually falling through didn't happen all that much, but it still can. Then we have that hash map. We just insert with the offset and the ID. And for all of the obstacle samples, we spawn in one of these cubes. And the cubes are just kind of like placeholder stuff. Gen land chunk is the function that does our actual mesh generation. So we're doing 64 subdivisions. It's a square. We do a mesh from those chunk sizes with this amount of subdivisions. We take those positions, we modify them based on the noise. So we're sampling the noise based on the VEC3s with some modulation, multiplying by the amplitude for the Y height, computing the normals and giving back the mesh. Am I part of the maintainers in Bevy? I would say no. But you basically have like, I don't want to call them tiers necessarily, but like there's Cart and Alice who are paid by the foundation to work on Bevy. And then outside of that, there's a bunch of subject matter experts, people who are participating in the board and stuff like that. And outside of that, there's a bunch of people who have like triage access and submit PRs and do various maintenance tasks on different, files and do reviews and stuff like that. So I'm in that outer edge, but I'm not, like, I wouldn't call myself a maintainer personally. And I don't think that anybody else would either. But somebody who is unfamiliar might. I do maintain some crates in the ecosystem. But Bevy is kind of organized in a way that makes it easy to contribute and help maintain different areas without actually being like the person to do that, if that makes sense. Like, you don't have to be paid by the foundation to contribute code or reviews or ideas or anything like that. And even if you are, like a subject matter expert or whatever, there are other subject matter experts in your in your area. So like, if you want to do something, you still have to convince those other people that it's a good idea to do. So like, you get more trust as a subject matter expert. But like, it doesn't fundamentally change the idea that you have to like still convince everybody else that it's a good idea to do something. I think at the end of the day, Cart has final say on everything. And obviously Alice has a lot of influence. And then the subject matter experts probably have the next level of influence. And then there's everybody else. But yeah, one thing that is worth noting is like if you wanted to, as somebody who has no access to the Bevy repo, is not on the triage team, does not do, like has never contributed or whatever, even if you are in that state, you can go into this list of pull requests, maybe go into this one, which I was looking at yesterday, and like, see if I can make this a little bit smaller, and like do review. Like I took this PR, I took some Kenny assets, some KKit assets, turned the feature flag on, figured out what happened. It looked fine. I did another test scene in Blender. That didn't work because we aren't because we aren't handling cameras. I put that on the PR. And like this doesn't require any access. This is just something you can go do. Be confused. That's funny. And review is like always good. Like we're always looking for more reviewers. So I think the terrain chunking can actually be its own crate. I don't think that it's not particularly tied to anything else. I think the only place that we do this is currently if we start playing the game. So this is completely encapsulated and could go into a separate crate. I think that we're gonna need more. So there's a choice to make in whether this is procedurally generated with noise and stuff, or if it's manually curated. And both of those choices have like benefits and drawbacks. If you look at like a Sonic level, for example, right? Wow, am I gonna blank? This one. Forget what level this is called. Emerald Coast. But Sonic levels are like designed, right? Like you can stop and run and like there's a lot of running forward, obviously, but it's all very much like built by hand, which gives it like a certain ability for players to get better at it over time. You can put things in specific places intentionally. If something goes wrong, then you don't necessarily need to, or like you'll know through playtesting, right? Doing procedural generation has very different constraints. So even if we do Procgen for all of the terrain and stuff, there's no way for me to to guarantee that a cube doesn't spawn right in front of you, right? Which I like this, right? Like that can happen. And like you can put in basically a bunch of safeguards. Like if there's an end of the level and you need to get through the end portal or whatever, make sure that you don't like spawn an enemy like in the end portal so that the player can never get into it. But that's the trade-off on Procgen. You basically end up having to do, I guess it's a little bit like the same trade-off as like physics or using physics in this sense. Like the Procgen allows you to build infinite amounts of levels, but some of those levels are going to be bad, right? Like some of those levels are not going to be set up correctly. Like this, like if that cube is right there when you spawn into the level, what are you supposed to do to avoid hitting that? And really, TLDR, there's nothing the player can do. This is a level design failure. So you kind of have to like do a lot of extra testing for the procedural generation, and then it becomes a question of like, how expensive is that? How much do you cheat? Because like just doing some noise generation and modifying the vertices is fine, right? This obviously works in that sense. I think it's enough to realize that like kind of the core mechanic of like landing in different places and that gaining more speed is fun. But then all of these other questions come up as like, okay, so if I, you know, take off here, right? Is there a place for me to land that I can get to? Maybe, you know, like it's not necessarily guaranteed that there's going to be a place for you to do a good landing, right? And you can already see it kind of happening where like I have to land on the back of some, like this is going to be a good one, but like that last one was kind of like, okay, where do I even go, you know? And like here, you have to hit the backside of that hill. You have to land in that valley. Here you can land and like do a little launch, but like, can you get over that cube? Maybe. And for Procgen, like all of those, like limiting those things is going to be very important. And that's going to be, I think, just as much work as like designing levels from scratch. All right, so assets, source, target, terrain. Post-processing is something that I'm not actually using yet. I just have all the code set up to do it. I want to do more effects like when you hit things and whatnot. I have played other games that do these kinds of things. Like we talked about Sonic already. There's also Tiny Wings is another one. This is 2D. I think we can play it here. Let's get the audio down. So it's like spacebar, mouse touch. Like when you're going down, hold spacebar, release spacebar. And then like even there was nothing for me to, there was nothing that could like prevent me from hitting the back of that first mountain. Right. So there has to be special consideration to make sure that damn. There has to be special consideration to make sure that like the player can actually play the game. Cause like at some point you go so fast here, right? That you actually can't make it into some of these valleys because they're too deep. Right? Like I'm not really gaining enough speed to show that off, but like at some point it becomes hard to actually match like the backside of the hill. Because if you go fast enough, you're just going horizontally super fast. Which, if you think about like the mechanic here, If you think about it as like a sine wave, right? The faster you go, the smoother the sine wave needs to go for you to be able to like accurately land on it. I think that gets tough too with the procedural generation and the way that the game works. Hey, Kyman, how's it going? There's also what, Haste? There's a recent game that does a similar thing in like 3D. I don't think I can play this one on stream. Well, actually, I could. I could play this one on stream. I have my OBS set up to do that. I forgot about that. But one of the things about Haste is they chose to go Procgen. And when they chose to go Procgen, they introduced, see if I can find, like explosions and stuff. This is not going to be. Am I going to be able to find this? I can describe it, but I want a visual aid. I'm not going to be able to find this. In any case, there are situations inside of like Haste where the obstacles that you have to actually avoid grow in size faster than you run. So if you have a sphere, right, and the sphere is like tiny, like it's basically non-visible, and that expands to like a 30 by 30 sphere, right? So we've got 30 by 30 cubes here in our current iteration of this game. And imagine these were like spawning in as very small cubes and then expanding to like the 30 by 30 size. So if it spawns in and you go like past it inside of, so like if you were here, the obstacles in Haste that grow faster than your player character actually moves. So you can get hit by something that is basically like spawning between the camera and your player. Which doesn't feel good. And I don't know I don't know exactly what the solution to that is. I think that like if you are past something, if something is between the camera and your player, then it should be kind of like disabled for collision. Make a spawn platform maybe? You mean to start the level? I mean, like, we can do a spawning platform. I'm just wondering why. I also don't, like, in my head, the vision for this is, like, maybe you get shot out of a cannon into the level, which would be kind of cool. Jeez. Because, like, if you want to start with some velocity, starting like it is right now is kind of awkward. Because you're just kind of like, here, you're on the land now. So I think that, like, to start a new level, depending, see, we were inside of the tri-mesh, but it didn't matter. It only matters if the like landscape is going up, because otherwise you're gonna float through it a little bit. So one of the things that I want to do for the movement is actually set up some tests. for the collision and stuff, and then test out some other colliders. You start being propelled by a giant rubber band. Rubber band would be cool. Yeah, so don't spawn the player on the ground, so they fall down and have more time to react before you enter the gameplay area. I don't. Well, that's not really what I was getting at, in the sense of like, if you choose procedural generation, you are going to run into situations in which like the level is unfair, right? So this is a really basic version of a level, right? And I was just using the starting position and that cube spawn as an example, but it applies to the entire level, right? Like there are places at which you cannot be moving fast enough to be able to gain speed if you have to land inside of these gaps to be able to gain speed, right? And that's a really frustrating experience. If you can't gain speed from a standstill, then what are you supposed to do, right? And that makes the that makes anything that goes wrong with the procedural generation even more frustrating as a player, right? Like here's fine, and like maybe I land here and that's fine. And this goes back into the level design as well, right? Like the faster we go, the more flat the landing areas need to be. There isn't really an option around that, I don't think. Because like at some point you're not going to be able to fall fast enough to hit the back of a hill, right? So at some point the gameplay changes. And either one of the things that I've thought about here is maybe instead of just having landscape, there's also more like above it. So instead of just landing on the ground repeatedly, you could land on elevated platforms or walls that are like billboards on top. So why not make them flatter, interpolated with speed? I feel like tying the level building to the speed of the player is weird. Because like I don't know, I'm thinking about it. It's not like a bad idea in that sense. Like anything can work. I'm not really trying to solve any particular issue right now. I'm just kind of pointing out the difference between procedural generation and like a designed level, right? Like a designed level can do a number of things in terms of kind of knowing how fast you're going to be able to be going at a certain level, etc. Or like pre-setting up the ability to have like a bunch of speed rings in different places, or like in Mario Kart, if you jump off, you get Lakitu, right? And then you can get a speed boost when you get put back on the level. So like maybe the answer for like hitting something and needing to come back up to speed is there's just like a sprint button of some kind that doesn't really like do anything at high speeds per se, but helps you get back up to speed when you're low. From a game design perspective overall, I think that it's kind of incredibly punishing to hit something, because you end up taking such a speed loss Right? Like we just went from 150 down to 80 or whatever, which is fine. Gravity stops working if you go back to the main menu. But yeah, anyway. I think we're going to go with procedural generation anyway. I don't think I'm going to design levels over and over. Let's see. Movement. God, it is insane how much my neighbors smoke. The other thing is that fast fall probably shouldn't add to your velocity. And I haven't quite figured out how to deal with that. Because, like, I don't know. One of the things I'm struggling with is basically if you want to do a more physical based controller, right? You want to do something with avian. And you want to do kinematic or dynamic or whatever, then I know it's the opinion of John Dolph that everything should go through linear velocity to control the player. But I don't really want the fast fall to contribute momentum to the player. And how do you do that at that point? And do you even have a physical controller at that point? Because, like, I mean, I guess you could always set the falling rate. I don't know. Procedural generation is more fun for a coder. Yeah, but I want to take this and I want to finish a game. Right? So Procgen, sure. But there are significant downsides to choosing Procgen. Like I've gone over, right? Like things can get placed in weird places, and you could have situations that you like almost are not capable of getting out of, right? There are going to be like hill sections that you cannot find a space to land in, right? But I also don't necessarily think that I want to build 50 levels. How does the fast fall work now? Fast fall is literally just I think this is the fast fall area, right? I didn't expose it in the game, but there is logic for determining like how good your landing was. This is the fast fall logic. So we query for the linear velocity of the player, iterate over everything. We have a raycast down to determine whether the player is grounded or not. If it's within a certain distance, we consider them grounded. If they are not grounded, then we either, and this is fast fall, so not like gravity times 7 over the delta seconds, or if you're not fast falling, gravity times 2. which is fine, but I wonder if maybe I separate the like the XZ velocity and the Y velocity and just treat them completely different. Right, so that's regular 2x speed or whatever. And then this is 7. And you can see every time I hold space, the velocity increases. So the way that I'm doing the math right now takes into account the entire vector, like the entire 3D vector. Do you have an error resistance term? No. No error resistance at the moment. Terminal velocity is kind of not something I'm terribly concerned about at the moment. The one thing that I would like to happen is kind of if you hit terminal velocity, right? Let's say terminal velocity is 150 meters per second or something, right? If you hit 150 and you continue to hit like perfect landings repeatedly, you should be able to go faster than that. Is there a reason for only using Linvel? Why not change gravity dynamically or apply force downwards? What do you mean by that? Gravity is like gravity affects the linear velocity, right? Like gravity is a force downwards. So this is like doing anything to y is a force downwards. So I'm not sure what you mean by why not change gravity dynamically. Because that is effectively what we're doing. The whatchamacallit, the controls in game can be played with a controller, but the menus cannot as well. So we need to do that. So yeah, I think the jam was enough to like prove that like going 100 miles an hour on a procedurally generated mesh or whatever and like picking places to land is fun enough that you could build a game around it. The question now is how and why and what. And in that sense, there's questions around the controls, like we've been talking about. So do I actually want a physical controller if I'm going to... Right, because I don't imagine vertical air maintenance to be a point of acceleration for the entire vector. When I think about this game, I think about managing the vertical velocity, or not the vertical velocity, but I imagine managing the vertical position in the sense of like, yeah, at some point, you want to try to line up with these hills and stuff, and staying lower makes more sense. But it shouldn't add to the velocity. So that's something that I truly don't know the answer to. I think that I think I am definitely not how do I say this? It's a sticking point in my head right now to do everything in terms of linear velocity, because that doesn't feel like a very physical interaction. So if it's not a physical interaction and I am dealing with everything myself anyway, do I even want a kinematic rigid body? Like, do I even want avian for any of that stuff? And this is kind of where I get into, like, I've done research for what kinds of controllers other people use in their games and stuff. I think for very simple games, it largely doesn't matter. And the vast majority of people on the internet don't understand the difference between a dynamic and a kinematic character controller, which is interesting. And there's very little prose on the internet about character controllers in general. But I will say, working with the linear velocity just feels very awkward. It felt very awkward. Whatchamacallit? Kinematic. Is this the repo? No. KCC prototype, I think, is the repo. The other thing is there was a bunch of people who got together like a month or two ago and started trying to build a character controller. And like the way that they're doing it is by modifying transform. But John Dolph doesn't feel like that is the right way to do things. And I have similar questions about this kind of thing, where like if you're doing stairs, then that means you have to do a velocity vector that is vertical and then horizontal. That's a funny comment. I'm not sure what this does, but I think it's correct. So when it comes to like a fast fall or whatever, if we go with the kinematic body, if we go with the physical approach, then I think we have to do linear velocity. And if we do linear velocity, then we kind of have to like, accumulate the downward speed and then remove it when you let go, which is really the only way that I can think of doing that. Right? Like Linval y yada yada minus equals this. And then we would have to take this value that we're adding to it and just like calculate it here. That's, 'cause, 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 but downward velocity. It's like a local that's an F32, right? And it starts out with 0 and shake gas grounded. So if we are fast falling, then additional velocity equals this, right? Minus equals that. Accumulated downward velocity minus equals that. So as long as we're holding it down, we add that to the accumulation, and when we let go, see, now we get into like the multiple ways in which you can like have to replace this velocity. So like holding it in a local here isn't really going to work unless we let go before we land. If less than 0, then so like technically this would work. And we would want to zero this out too. So theoretically, this would add the additional velocity as long as you're holding it. And then if you are I need to gain a bunch of speed now. We do, let's see, player. This is obviously buggy, but player. Let's start with like 150. Just get some velocity going here. So it's not really what I want anyway. Because you kind of bounce back up. Which is wrong. Gravity. So like this doesn't work for zeroing it out. I guess this would be, or something that's a little bit better would be tracking the regular velocity, the regular downward velocity, and tracking the fast fall velocity. And then if you aren't holding the fast fall button, then using the non-fast fall velocity. There also needs to be a handling of like what happens if you aren't grounded and then grounded. But in any case, I think I'll just leave this for later. So there's definitely a couple of like a couple of things that come together in terms of the controls that need to be fixed. So the fast fall is one thing. The kind of inability to gain speed when you're moving slow is another. The capped speed at the other end, similar to the inverting of the curve that we talked about earlier. The other thing is that the determination for whether you landed well or not is not currently working very well. Do I have that logging out? Yeah, I do. Where's the landing velocity? God, I can taste cigarettes on my mouth, on like the tip of my tongue, and it really throws me off. I feel like the last few streams I've done have been tough to keep my focus on. So like an okay landing, okay, okay, good. That wasn't a good landing. That's not what I would have considered a good landing. So I am going to need to like break this down into a set of test cases, I think. Like right now we're using, there we go. That was the, Jesus. So this is always the output right before you fall through the level. Invalid slide dir. And I think that this is a consequence of penetrating the tri-mesh. So once our shape cast, or once our object penetrates the tri-mesh, that is the landscape, then our shape cast can no longer do anything with it. So this is like this isn't the cause of falling through. We are already falling through, I think, at the time that this is logged out. And this is and this is somewhat due to the handling of velocity. So like linear velocity from one frame to another, if the direction of that linear velocity puts it into the tri-mesh, it will just put it into the tri-mesh. So I think that that is actually a issue at the end of the day with the casting. But it's kind of tough to figure out when you don't have a test case. So I'm going to need to rewrite this a little bit. And there's something that there's not a lot of people that use in Bevy, but there's system stepping. I don't remember where the example for this is. System stepping. So system stepping will allow you to advance a frame at a time, which, if we can develop a test case and put the camera in the right spot, would allow us to visualize what's happening. So it would be cool if we could write a test case that we could also automatically drop into a stepped like bin and then be able to step through it ourselves to visualize it in addition to having the test case. I feel like this doesn't get a lot of usage because it's a little bit annoying to set up. At least I don't see a lot of people talking about it in general. But it's been in for a few releases now. Jeez. Oh, one sec. I swear, I don't get it. The rule is 20 feet away from doors and windows. And a month later, they still can't get it. Um, where were we? So let's see. Can we do that? Can we build a test case here? I don't know. Jeez. Um, I mean, we definitely can in a sense, right? Like we can do. I guess if we're going to make this a workspace, it's not going to be examples. So let's do source. Sorry, if this continues, I'm going to have to stop. Bin. Jesus. Bin debug debug casting maybe. So if we do this, then we will also need at least the avian plugins. Physics plugins default. We will want the debug plugins as well. I don't think this has a default on it. Maybe it does. I guess it does. And then this requires the player to be spawned, time to be active. It also queries obstacles, but we don't really do anything to them. We just exclude them. So we can turn that into a collision layer in the future, I think. But other than that, we just need to have the obstacle type around. And then the question here is, how do we actually write a test here? Because I guess at the end of the day, my assumption is that the linear velocity. You know what I just realized, actually? Where are we getting the slide there? From the accumulation. Yeah, okay. Normal should always be positive, so that should always bring us away from the mesh that we're hitting. And we're basically going to want to be able to turn off these gizmos or turn them on at any given time. And then we'll want to step through, I guess, what's going on. This could go into a configuration component, right? Like the origin, direction, linear velocity, slide accumulation, new direction for each of the hits. So what this is doing is basically taking our player, running a shape cast using our capsule in the direction that we want to send it from the origin that we are at. And we're capping it at the magnitude of the vector. So we take our three-dimensional vector, we turn it into a length. That's our magnitude. That is effectively our t, like how far we can cast out. We are excluding a whole bunch of stuff, including ourselves and any obstacles that are on the level. Once we've done the cast, if we don't hit anything, then we are kind of done. Should we be continuing there? I don't think so. I think we should be breaking out of that. Was that the issue? Was the issue that we were doing like 5 casts even when we weren't, like we didn't have valid? This is one of the nice things about streaming is that you just keep repeating things. So thank you all for being rubber ducks if this actually was the issue. For all of the for all of the things go slower when you're streaming talk, definitely just repeatedly explaining things over and over is useful. I don't know, it doesn't happen that often, so. But we're looking pretty good in general. I think we're supposed to break there. I don't know why I had continue. The other thing is for the control, I'm kind of like rotating the directional vector, and I don't know that that's the right choice. That feels a little bit like wonky. I'm using a rotation matrix to rotate the whatever vector you're facing in a little bit to the right or to the left or whatever. And I think that the thing I want to do for controller is just whatever direction you're pointing in is the direction you're going in. For mouse and keyboard, it feels a little bit tougher because you only get those 45-degree angles and you don't have any other control. See if we can force this to happen. Nope. Yeah, so now we get invalid slider and it doesn't it doesn't continue 5 times. Which I think that was the bug fix actually for falling through. Instead of so we've labeled this loop. You can label loops in Rust. And this loop goes all the way down to all of like the hit accumulation and stuff. But if our shape cast doesn't hit anything, then we kind of just have to take what we have already and break out of this loop. So we shouldn't be continuing. Like if we hit, if we have a mistake on hit 2 and we have a max of 5 hits, we shouldn't continue to hit 3 if our shape cast isn't hitting anything. We should just be going in that direction. Sweet. Let's see. Re-enable DevTools. Fix collide and slide by breaking out if collision or if shapecast has no hits. I don't really want to push this because it'll run CI and I don't want to run CI, but I'll push it up anyway. Maybe we'll just cancel it. Cool. Let's see. So we end up with speed text getting updated, which is this. This should probably go in a different spot. Let's make this better. Or make this faster to start with. I think that 30 is not enough. Oh, we are doing 50. That's interesting. So why is our magnitude... Oh, there's 50. Okay. Yeah, the idea of changing the terrain based on how fast you're going is like interesting, but it would prevent multiplayer. I don't know that I really want to do multiplayer or anything. I think I'm just going to skip it for this, but just keeping that sort of thing in mind, because one of the things that procedural generation does get you is like infinite numbers of like courses, so to speak. And if you have infinite numbers of courses, that means that you can't have a whatchamacallit. Like if you if you're playing Mario Kart or something, somebody can really learn the level really well, right? And you're seeing that with Mario Kart World at the moment, where people are like jumping off the level, going under things, jumping off the sides of columns to do like course skips. But if you don't know what the level looks like, it's harder for you to have an advantage over somebody that doesn't know the level, which I think is kind of cool. So like if you were going to race with, 2 or 3 other people, was good. That was... Jeez. I'm gonna look back on this stream and be like, wow, I was coughing a lot. Where's this? This is sample. Sample is not what I want. Sample is in... Where am I logging out sample? Not in post-process. Terrain chunking. There, 151. Turn that log off. Yeah, for doing the like judgment of landing, I'm gonna have to do what I was trying to do earlier and like step through and have a number of different cases where I think they should be different values. All right. I think I'm going to cut it early today. I'm really having a hard time with the amount of smoke that's coming into my apartment, as you might be able to tell from the coughing. And it's really messing with my ability to think. So we'll be back on Monday for another stream, but I'm going to cut it early today and try to get out of this room a little bit. So thanks everyone for coming, and I will see you in the next one. This week in Bevy, I'm almost caught up. I just need to make the video this week. So expect that to come soon.